Pete, I mean, Paul said in there, the speed of the crime. Do we have any idea at all, please, about when it potentially could, it could be resolved? Is it going to be end of the 2024-25 season? Could it even creep into 2026? How long are we expecting this to take?
Well, Richard Masters of the Premier League said there has been a date set for these hearings. He wouldn't say when. And there has been a few rumours that it could be autumn time, just after the start of the new season. But with so many charges Manchester City are facing, and they're obviously contesting them as well, it is going to be dragged out. I think there'll be lots of independent commissions and lawyers involved. I don't think we're going to get probably a verdict until probably at the earliest, the end of next season. And again, it does make a bit of a mockery of it as well. If you're talking about teams at the wrong end of the table fighting relegation, you've got Manchester City at the top end fighting for Premier League titles. So the rivals who are up against them in that one would be thinking, why hasn't this been dealt already before? Because it would give them a better chance of winning the league. So yeah, I think it's been drawn out way too long, and I don't expect it to be resolved anytime soon as well, because of the complexity of the whole case with 115 charges. And Manchester City obviously vowing to clear their name and to fight those charges as well. So yeah, it's been a long drawn out process as it stands, and I think we've got a long time still to wait before we do get final clarity on what's going to happen to Manchester City with these charges and the Premier League.
Pete, where does it sit in with UEFA? If Manchester City are found guilty while competing in the Champions League or while competing in a European competition, does it have any ramifications in European competitions if they are found guilty in the Premier League?
I don't think it'll affect them in Europe. Obviously, if they get relegated or expelled from the league, they won't be able to qualify for the Champions League unless they're in it and they win it, which could happen. The way things are looking for Manchester City, they could.
That would be unique, wouldn't it? The League Two winners winning the Champions League as well.
Never say never with Manchester City. We can see Kevin De Bruyne down playing in League Two and Erling Haaland and everything else. But obviously, the UEFA rules, they have brought in these limits in spending on player and manager wages, transfers, and agents' fees and everything else to a percentage of the club's revenue. So I think it's 90% of your revenue this season, and then it'll be reduced to 70% from the 2025-26 season. Doesn't really affect probably the bigger clubs as much as maybe the smaller clubs, because Manchester City's revenues, I think there was some figures out recently, were right up there, I think, as the top earning club revenue-wise, up with the Real Madrids and the Manchester United as well. So 70% of, say, 500 million revenue still allows them to spend heavily in the transfer market and to offer the big wages. While let's look on the flip side of Nottingham Forest, we're obviously talking about them. Their revenue might be 200 million because they're not in the Champions League. They haven't got massive stadium for attendances and everything else, and their revenue is going to be a lot less than Manchester City. But 70% of 200 million means they've got a lot less to play with when it comes to transfer fees and wages and everything else. So that's why there will always be a gap between these big clubs and then the rest trying to close the gap. And that's why it's not a level playing field, like Paul says. So although UEFA say these spending rules do close the gap, I don't see it really, because the big clubs still will have the huge revenues through sponsorship deals. And we know there's been a few murmurings of how some of these bigger clubs do get their sponsorship deals as well. So it's a minefield, the whole thing.
What about Pep? What do you think about Pep? If it does come out that City are guilty of various charges, how many we've kind of discussed remains to be seen, could Pep walk, or do you think he would actually stay? Because you'd assume potentially he wouldn't want to tarnish his career, or at least go through that process. Where do you stand with that?
Well, he's been quite bullish when he was asked about it a few months back, saying that if Man City were relegated, he would stick around and stay as coach in the Championship or whatever league they are put in. My feeling is, I think we've obviously seen Jurgen Klopp step down this summer. I think Pep Guardiola will probably leave in 2025. I think he'll see out his contract at Manchester City, go out on a high and have a break himself. He's coming up to similar time of what Klopp's done. I think it'll be like 9 to 10 years he will have done come the end of 2025. And I think Pep Guardiola, obviously, he has been at clubs before, but this is the longest spell he's been in charge of a club. Manchester City's obviously had a decent spell at Barcelona, 3 years at Bayern Munich, and obviously this is his longest managerial reign at City. So I think come the end of his contract in 2025, my opinion is I think that Pep Guardiola will probably leave Manchester City, whatever the charges, whether they've been a verdict or not. I just feel he'll see out his contract and have a sabbatical and see what happens from there.
You've just watched a segment from Football Insider's brand new podcast, The Inside Track, with me, Lewis Pearce, alongside the guests on the show. Thanks very much for tuning in. Please do give the video a like, comment your thoughts on the topic, and feel free to share on your social media pages. If you want to listen to the full podcast episode, click the link in the description below. Keep your eyes peeled for plenty more content and exclusives here on The Inside Track.